Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Group Program Manager Windows Azure, Karandeep Anand.
Good afternoon, and welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch. We didn't get any, but well, hope the lunch was still good. So first of all, thank you for joining us as we continue our journey through all the announcements that got made since morning, and Scott's session, Mark's session. And we'll continue talking about a list of the new services, especially about Windows Azure websites in the next 1 hour. And before we get any deeper into the session, I want to make a quick note that if you have any questions along the way, feel free to post them on Twitter, and we'll take questions towards the end if they don't get answered while you posted them. So what I want to do is, before I get into deep dive of what Windows Azure Website Service is all about, just want to provide some perspective on Windows Azure websites, both in context of everything else Windows Azure, as well as how you think about Windows Azure vis-a-vis what you do today with building websites on premises. So, Windows Azure is Microsoft's public cloud offering, and we understand that most of you come from building web applications on premises in your own data center or data center that space that you lease out from somebody else. In a world like that, you are responsible for everything right from the hardware, whether it's networking hardware or virtualization layer upwards, all the way to the actual application itself. So if you're building a simple ASP.NET website, for example, if you're running it on premises, you own everything from bringing up the web server, either on a virtualized environment or on a physical environment, and then everything from the operating system, firewall rules, load balancers, and that's the whole stack that you're comfortable with. Of course, when you get into the application itself, it's pretty much the same whether you're running ASP.NET or you're running any other stack. Now, let's compare that with what Windows Azure has to offer. And what Scott talked about earlier today was we have multiple different ways of running your application or hosting it in Azure. The first method is what Mark talked about right before the session, was the ability to have virtual machines. So that's the easiest way, if you will, where you have existing applications running on premises. You can bring them as is in a VHD, which is the virtual machine format, and run them in Azure. And at that point, you're still responsible for managing everything upwards from the operating system. We take away the pain of managing any hardware, any networking stack, disaster recovery, capacity planning. All that goes away. And Windows Azure offers you a virtual machine managed for you, deployed for you, using the tools of your choice. And you are responsible from that point onwards up the stack. So whether you want to run a website, everything from deploying the web server, configuring it, setting up your firewall rules, load balancers, is something that you do. And that's what Mark spent an hour talking about, on how you can configure that for a highly available, scaled-out service as well. Compare that with cloud services. That's the PaaS model, or moving from the infrastructure to the PaaS, where the infrastructure, the operating system itself, is completely abstracted from you, where you don't have to worry as much about patching, uptime of the operating system. That's what the Windows Azure's service itself takes care for you. But you're still responsible for managing stack up from how you set up your firewall rules, access control, who comes in, goes out. And at that point, you're focusing a lot more on the application, because you're no longer worried about how my application will scale out. But you have to conform to a certain set of design principles, if you will, in being able to leverage a stateless model of building an application. So that was the power of cloud services. And with Windows Azure websites, we've taken the abstraction even one level higher, where you don't have to worry about the VMs or web roles or worker roles where your application runs. All you care and focus on as a developer is essentially the website and the web application that you build. And of course, the data it accesses, whether it's within the app or externalized. But that's the layer at which you operate when you're working with Windows Azure websites. So as you go from moving from your data center to Windows Azure, you drop a few levels of things you have to worry about and manage, and start moving to using one of the three methods of hosting your applications, whether it's virtual machines, cloud services, or websites. And this session, of course, we're going to focus more about how you use a completely managed service like Windows Azure websites to run at scale and at high performance web applications using this new service. The one thing to remember is, as you go from left to right, you focus more and more on the application and a lot less on the infrastructure. So, of course, on-premises infrastructure is your problem. As you move more and more towards the right, the whole power of a managed platform and a service is that you don't have to worry about how the infrastructure or the underlying plumbing runs, and you worry, as a developer or even as a IT pro, more on the application semantics and the application design than the underlying plumbing itself. So that's just from a perspective of either you're coming from on-premises or if you choose to use other services in Windows Azure, how websites fits into the overall story. When we built out we were building this service, we had 3 principles in mind, and hence 3 promises we want to make while offering the service. One was, we want you to start simple. The whole promise of you don't have to learn any new concepts, either of cloud or of Windows Azure, but just focus on starting with things that you know, whether you're building ASP.NET applications or you're building Node or PHP applications. You already learned, you already spent the cycles to understand those concepts of developing applications and design. You should be able to bring that, start really simple. In fact, not just simple, start free. And that's one of the things that Windows Azure websites is. You can start with 10 free websites, and when you feel you've got your app up and running, it's popular, it's ready, you can quickly scale up into a paid mode, and you can actually start paying when you need to, if you want to, and when you're ready. So, but it's completely frictionless, so you don't have to worry about deploying a web server or figuring out any other way to get started, except for writing your first Hello World application, and off you go. The other design principle and I promise to you is you can focus on the code, and you can focus on bringing all your legacy applications, anything that you've built, all the way from go back to classic ASP in 1996. If you've built any application on Microsoft's web stack, that continues to work as is in Windows Azure websites. So it's not that you leave your old investments on premises or where they are. You always can move them with Windows Azure websites into the cloud and get all the benefits of the cloud, at the same time preserving your investments with what you've built over these years. And more importantly, your focus is on the code itself than the infrastructure, as I talked about earlier. Whether you have any framework, Microsoft or non-Microsoft, as long as it can run on IIS stack on premises, it can run in Azure. That's the promise. And the third one is the ability to work with the live application. And that was a lot of feedback we heard in the past, which was, I really want to make live changes. I have multiple teams collaborating. I want to be able to quickly iterate, roll back, roll forward, or be able to fix issues real time. And that's the power of Windows Azure websites, that you're working and going live and going big instantaneously. So there's no long deployment cycles, there's no long processes, no special tools to go learn. And that's what Windows Azure websites offers, which is the ability to go live and work on live websites itself. So with those 3, we really want you to start simple, start free, and be able to scale up as your application evolves and as your needs evolve for what the web application has to offer. So before we go into start seeing demos, most of this talk is going to be all about demos, and I'll have Neil join me on the stage shortly. We just want to take a quick walk down the memory lane. I don't know how many of you remember, back in 1996, that's when Microsoft announced its first web server. Anyone remember this announcement? Oh, actually, thanks. That discloses my age and yours. So it's pretty good. But that's, back in 96, 97, that's when Microsoft announced its first web server, or we came out with a personal web server. You can run under your desk a full-blown web server, host websites. That was pretty cool. I mean, you could just throw in a bunch of ASP code, get some stuff up and running. You don't have to worry about any complex setup over the web servers. And of course, that same simplicity is what 15 years forward we want to bring, but even make it more powerful and robust and enterprise-grade scalable if you need to. And of course, back then we support classic ASP, and I don't know how many of you remember writing response.write and saying, hey, hello world. And what I want to do is we want to start talking about Windows Azure websites and see how even something written in 1996 using classic ASP continues to work and you can bring any of your old applications into Windows Azure websites. So to prove that this actually works, please welcome Nir Meshkovsky. Nir is a lead program manager on the Windows Azure websites team. Hi. And he'll be walking us through a couple of demos, and the first one being using classic ASP with Windows Azure websites. And no fancy tools, we'll just go ahead use FTP as a base way of publishing applications. So there's nothing that is unique to Windows Azure that you have to learn, and you can still get started with your legacy applications. So can we switch to demo?
Yep.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks, Karan. So when we decided to demo ASP, we had to find someone in the office that actually knows how to do it. So they found the oldest guy, which was me. So, bear with me here. But I actually was in a web startup in '98 where we used ASP. So that's definitely a walk down memory lane. A little bit of orientation, if you will, on the management portal. I'm sure a lot of folks have seen it in demos or already had the chance to play with it. But basically what we're seeing here are all the services that we support. As we get more services, they're just going to automatically appear on this left nav. You've seen the IaaS demos for the virtual machine, the cloud services. We have a SQL database that we will use in one of the demos later on. So I'll start and just create a new website. So, keeping with the theme, hello ASP 1999. Oops, that's probably not going to be so successful. And I'll go ahead and create it. One of the things that we like is that one of the themes we have with Windows Azure website is website in seconds. This website is already up and running. And what I can do now is go into the dashboard. We provide several publishing mechanisms which I'll go through. We'll start up with FTP. So the system creates provisions an FTP hostname for me, as well as a username. The username can be given later on if you work in a team where you have a graphic designer that has to upload stuff. You can have a mix mode where you use several publishing methods. So I'll go into FileZilla, just your random FTP client, put in the location, and use the username. The username actually includes the website name. So this is how we know which website we're going to look at. And we'll go ahead and connect. So I can blame all latency issues on the fact that this site is actually in North America. We do have a data center here in Amsterdam, but all these demo accounts are provisioned for the previous TechEd in Orlando. So now I can see the files for this website. At this point, there's only a hosting start. So let's go ahead and create a new file. So we'll create a default .asp. There was no requirement to know how to type in order to get into this demo, which is obviously a mistake. So here I have my awesome code that I wrote all night. And it has some, hello Amsterdam. I think that's in Dutch. That's what I was told. No one speaks Dutch in the room. So we'll go ahead and save this. This should show up now in my project folder. And I'll just drag it over. So that's it. File is just
So that was
that's our
deployment?
Performance all the time.
Yep.
It's expected. So we'll go back to the portal, and now we can launch our website here. And we're launching, and Back to the Future. The power of Windows Azure website. Moving on to another trip down memory lane, right?
Yes, let's do that. So what you just saw was, except for coming to the portal and creating a new blank website, there was nothing specific that you had to go learn either in concepts of cloud or Windows Azure or any new tools. So existing applications, existing tools work as is, and you run them in Windows Azure. Can you switch back to the slides real quick? Mm-hmm. So the meta point being, if you have any existing applications, you can try them out today. It's a free trial to start with. And just deploy them as is, and you'll be up and running in a few seconds. And the deployment was that drag and drop Neer just did, saying, I'll move it from my local box, I push it over using FTP, and in a few seconds, you are live. So that goes back to the first 3 promises talked about. You can start simple, you can go live instantaneously, and you focus only on the code. Of course, that's classic ASP. I hope not a lot of you are still coding with classic ASP. You've come a long way since then. So the next big milestone for Microsoft and the web stack was the whole 2000 and 2002 era when we announced .NET. And then a few years later when Scott came up and announced ASP.NET. And then one of the things we moved with the whole .NET stack was building ASP.NET applications. And the most common one, I don't know how many of you recall, Pet Shop. Does this name ring a bell? Oh, wow, a few of you. Interesting. So, of course, we released Pet Shop as a sample application. It went through a few iterations through 1.0 to 2.0 edition of Pet Shop application itself. It was initially supposed to be an application that we would use to benchmark against Java. And then, of course, the community picked it up so well that it became as the de facto ASP.NET 2.0 application that we would always use for demos and show how the classic ASP moved to ASP.NET. And you still have the power of the stack. So let's see a quick demo of the whole .NET stack with ASP.NET 2.0 and a classic, long-lived Pet Shop application running in Windows Azure context. So here, you switch to the demos.
Cool. So we'll just go ahead and create a new website. So I ran out of clever name with the word Pet Shop in there, but let's try something here. Pet Shop Boise. Pet Shop. Yeah. And we'll go ahead and create this website. While I create it, notice we have one SQL database. We loaded the SQL database that had the Pet Shop database in there with some data that we had. It was very easy to just convert from SQL Server on-prem to SQL Server in cloud. And now I'm going to go and use Visual Studio 2010. Basically, we have a great integration with Windows Azure website using our web deploy protocol, which is part of IIS. First thing I have to do is actually go to the website again and download the publishing profile. So this publishing profile is useful for both web matrix, which I'll show later, and two versions of Visual Studio. And it includes essentially the keys for this website. It allows me to publish into it. So I'll go ahead and just publish. We'll import the file that we just downloaded and hit the publish button. What it's doing now, it's communicating with the server, starting the back and forth. It's uploading all the dependencies, all the awesome ASPX code, and it's loading up the application. So again, websites in seconds, actually, where with the tool set that we have a great integration working with the cloud. So we actually have some data, and if someone wants to buy a rattlesnake, they can call me later on.
So the only thing new you had to do then on the traditional Visual Studio 2010 was install the latest Windows Azure SDK. And what that gave you was the special or the new publish dialog. And that's the only enhancement on top of the vanilla VS 2010 that you're used to. And it just makes it easier so that you don't have to type the name and the username to connect to the web deploy endpoint running in Windows Azure websites. And you can be up and running, deploy, and push directly through Visual Studio to Windows Azure websites. That application does bring back memories. So switch back to slides real quick. What you just saw was, you can use the existing VS or Visual Studio toolset and both program with the base website, which is ASP.NET, as well as the first service that you start consuming, in this case, was SQL Azure. So Windows Azure websites works very well with all the other services that we offer, whether it's caching, service bus, or SQL. So you can start with the base website that you're used to and start expanding into using other value-added services managed for you in Azure so that you don't have to worry about ripping out the old code. The old code continues to work. At the same time, you get the benefits of being able to use a managed SQL server as opposed to standing up your own SQL server. You can always, as Mark talked about earlier, you can always stand up your own SQL server. So if you have any app compat concerns, you can always have a full SQL server running in Azure. Or you can switch to using SQL Azure databases directly, and that will make it even easier and faster to get your own database in under 10 seconds. So on a few seconds to get a website, a few seconds to get a database, and your pet shop, which used to take, first time I did it, it took me about 3.5 hours to get it up and running. It took about a minute to have this all up and running in Windows Azure. So, of course, now moving on, that was a classic ASP followed by ASP.NET 2.0 and .NET 2.0 applications. World's come a long way, and there's a whole bunch of other frameworks in addition to .NET, whether you're building applications in PHP, Node, and IIS on premises supports all those frameworks as well, and so does Windows Azure websites. So with Windows Azure websites, you can not just use these new frameworks, but you can use a lot of the new tooling and the new SDKs that got shipped as well. So let's see a quick demo of Windows Azure websites with modern applications built using, let's say, Visual Studio 2012, ASP.NET MVC4, and more importantly, a slightly different method of building. So it's not just an individual building an application, but if you have team and you have collaboration and you have source control systems, you can bring all of them in addition to just building your native applications in VS. So switch back to the demo real quick. We'll just see how you can bring the power of team collaboration and use modern applications with Windows Azure websites.
So in this case, we'll have this MVC4 survey application. And this application actually uses EF framework. So we don't need to explicitly create database. The database will actually get created the first time we launch the application. So again, I'm creating this new website. I'm going to download the publish profile because I'm going to use VS 2012. And I go into VS 2012. We have this kind of modern MVC app. And again, we'll go ahead and publish. This time, I'll go a little bit deeper into what the publish dialog has to offer for us. So initially, I can validate the connection in case that I did type it manually and so on. If I click next here, there's the ability to do database. So actually, one of the cool features about Web Deploy is the ability to have plugins. And some of the plugins we've implemented are for database deployment. So we have a MySQL, and we have for SQL Server and SQL Azure. And that allows us to actually upload schemas and do some kind of changes to schemas during deployment. So in this case, again, we don't need a database. Later on, I'll show some synchronization using MySQL. Moving forward, I can go ahead and preview the file diff between the client and the server. In this case, it just tells me that all these files have to be deployed because this is a brand new app. So we'll hit the publish button. And again, we're just pushing up all the DLLs and so on. And the browser will launch with the actual app in a moment.
So because it's the first time you're pushing the entire application, but if you make a change, it only pushes out the diffs between the version that you're working at as well as the version that's in the cloud. So
So again, as I mentioned before, now we're actually generating a new schema and generating a new database when we launch the site for the first time. So here we go. That's a simple app. And I think we're going to want to launch it later. I can go ahead and log in. And this is just creates a survey. I'll create a new survey, add a question. I'm going to hard code it for the answer to be yes. So it allows me to select the type of question I have, and then it generates the new form. So I can go ahead and submit my survey. So again, very quick creation. I can debug it locally and then push it to the cloud when it's ready. So this is kind of a very kind of Microsoft-centric approach. We have everything using Visual Studio, .NET, and so on and so forth. We mentioned TFS before. I think Scott showed a little bit. In general, I can go back to the portal, and I can set up TFS publishing for this. We won't go through all the steps here, but if you can go ahead and create a TFS online. It's in the preview as well. You can create an account, set up your project, and then if you lined up all the items together, you'll be able to push from Visual Studio directly, or actually do continuous integration by pushing out blessed builds into your Windows Azure website. So again, pretty powerful functionality if you couple it with our ability to scale up, which I'll show later, the ability to actually get your own web server. So you can imagine a situation where you develop a pretty robust app, you use TFS to synchronize your builds, and you can push them out to production-level website with Windows Azure website.
So this is TFS that we've integrated with, which is the hosted TFS service running in Azure as well. Of course, if you have a TFS server running on premises, you can also point that to publish directly to Windows Azure websites. And that's made possible because the Windows Azure websites implements the same web deploy protocol that TFS uses. So it doesn't matter whether you use Windows Azure, the TFS service as hosted from Microsoft, or use or bring your own. So any team collaboration environment solution that you use, because we use the standard methods that we support all along, which is web deploy and FTP, you can wire up any of those tools to go publish. It so happens that with TFS, there's even tighter and native integration. So you can get started if you don't already have a TFS. You can always bring your own.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to show now is actually move out of the kind of Microsoft path into Git. Git is an open source control system. It's pretty popular. Basically, I'm going to show two features. Obviously, I'm going to show Git itself and the ability to push Git files into Azure through a Git endpoint we implemented on Windows Azure website. And I'll also show the Azure command line tools that are available on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux, and allow us to basically do everything we've seen on the portal using command line. So we'll start off by essentially cloning a Git repository that has a simple Node.js application. So I'm going to go ahead and clone it. So this is just this repository. And what it's doing now, it's going to pull these files to the client. I'm going to go into this folder. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start interacting with Windows Azure websites. So this is our awesome command line tool. You can notice the fancy graphics, the Battlestar Galactica thing. It's very exciting. And there's actually a full set of APIs for Azure sites. So we're going to go ahead and create a new site. So I'm just going to type Azure site create. Let's call it Node API demo. And I'm going to tell it to enable Git. So by giving it the Git command line, what I'm doing is asking the Windows Azure website to create a Git repository on the server and wire up the client to be able to talk to it. So what it's actually doing is it's mapping the URL for the Git repository to the alias called Azure. So at this point, all I have to do is essentially push the code to Azure. So I can go ahead and say Git push Azure, which represents the website itself, master, which is the main branch. So I have to type the password. And the other exciting thing about the endpoint we implemented on the server side is it's able to actually do some kind of run some code. So in this case, it's running NPM, which is the Node.js package managers. It's pulling down some dependencies. But it also works for .NET. So in cases where you have applications that require NuGet or requires some kind of build on the server, Windows Azure website will do it for you while you push through Git. So in this case, the site is ready. And then I can go ahead and launch the site by saying Azure Site Browse. Because we had to have that command. And we just have this very simple Express application. So now let's say I want to customize it a little bit. So we'll go into the Views folder. And we're going to edit the index page. So we're going to add this a little bit. Oops. And now I'm going to commit my change into the source control and add some kind of a comment. Oops. That's interesting. I'm going to So now we committed this, and now we'll push this back up. I think someone in the background didn't like what I was typing. So again, we're going to push up. It will still run the NPM, but it will figure out that there's not too many changes for it, and we just changed one file. So there you go. And then I can go ahead and browse for the site again. And now we see that the change was there. So again, imagine a larger repository. There's a very popular website called GitHub, where a lot of people have a lot of projects. You can pull down into a local repository and push up to Windows Azure websites. So that kind of concludes the command line part. We think it's very cool that we're able to do the whole thing through scripting, which allow, again, if you have a situation where you want to have a bigger project where you script builds or you script creation and deletion of development websites, you can do it using our CLI tools.
And Windows Azure websites, in addition to providing a build system, which can be used, it also maintains the entire history. So Neil, do you want to quickly show us the two changes you made, so we can show you both the ability to quickly roll forward and roll back changes as well. So
if we go,
everything else we did was completely through the command line. So you could be sitting on a Mac, or you could sit in a Linux box, and still interact with Windows Azure websites, and not have to even install any separate tools for Windows. So you can do this through PowerShell. You can do it through the command line tools as well, and you get the full capability and interaction to manage the entire life cycle of the website as well.
Yeah, and in this case, we can actually see the two deployments that we've done. They're available to us on the website. And I can go ahead and roll back. So I can go and take the initial commit that we made and redeploy it. And then if we browse, we will not see the changes that I made. So again, when it's a bigger system, these things become much more relevant.
Yeah. So very easy way, because you're always working on the live website, it's very easy to roll back, roll forward. So if you figure out somebody in your team checked in a change which you don't want, you have a history available natively through the portal and through the command line, and you can go back or roll back as needed. And the same power is available if you use TFS as well. So the only difference you would notice is instead of seeing Git, if you can quickly switch back to the websites tab.
Yep.
Instead of seeing the Git icon there, you would see the same thing as TFS. So the source control system is natively integrated and understood by Windows Azure websites, so that we can take this from just doing a single developer way of building applications to multiple people working together. And as Neil mentioned, GitHub is a great way to collaborate with your sources in Azure. You can pull those repositories locally, push them up, work locally, debug locally. Essentially, every tool or every method that you've learned today works as is when you just choose Windows Azure websites as your deployment target, as opposed to hosting them on premises. So if you can quickly switch back to the slides. Great. So what you just saw was, on the journey of running classic ASP, AnyCode, to ASP.NET, to running MVC4 applications, but also running non-Microsoft frameworks, like Node in this case. And Windows Azure Websites natively understands PHP, Node, and the framework versions. So it does the right thing depending on what it detects in the application directory itself. In this case, we didn't have to specify whether I'm creating a Node website or I'm creating an ASP website. Azure Websites understands natively what is in it. So it will find server.js. It'll switch to running Node. If it finds the MVC project, it'll run actually the .NET Core as well. And you can, of course, toggle the version that you want to use. .NET was 2.40. But that's something that's completely managed for you, so you don't have to worry about updating the versions of the framework. We can take care of that for you. So one other demo we really want to show is when you don't want to code, or you're a web agency or a web app, and you really just want to build applications, or you just want to write a blog, and you really don't need to learn how to code a lot. There's a whole bunch of other ecosystem tools which were built around the web stack from Microsoft. And one of the tools that Microsoft ships was Web Matrix. We announced, I think 2 weeks ago, the availability of Web Matrix 2 as an RC. So it's still not released, but it's an RC version, which also natively understands Windows Azure. So let's see a quick demo, if we switch back to demo, of using a tool like Web Matrix as opposed to using Visual Studio or coding, and see the power of that integrating natively with Windows Azure. And while we're doing that, we'll probably take an example of a different application. This time, let's do PHP.
So in this case, we're going to actually utilize our web gallery. Web gallery is a set of open source applications. We've worked with the communities to get versions that are optimized for Windows Azure Website and for Windows Azure. And we started with about 10 of them, and we keep adding them as we move along. We'll start with the WordPress blog. It's in PHP, and it runs MySQL natively. So WordPress demo. And we're going to create a new MySQL database. We've partnered with ClearDB, who's a provider of MySQL as a service on several clouds, and they're supplying us with the service. It comes with one free 20 megabyte database, and folks can buy bigger databases through the ClearDB website.
So like SQL Azure, renamed to SQL databases in Windows Azure, ClearDB is a provider of very similar thing, but for MySQL instead. So you don't have to, again, deploy MySQL servers. You get the MySQL database offered as a service, much like you get SQL databases, now with the help of a partner called ClearDB, natively into Windows Azure as well.
And we're going to see more partners running different storage solutions like NoSQL coming on in the next several months. So what it's doing now is actually a lot of work. There's a bit of orchestration going on in the background, and our WordPress website is ready. But what happened was we went and actually pulled the WordPress package from WordPress.org. We provisioned a new MySQL database, and we created a new website. And all of this was done in like very short time. So this will be a Hello Cloud blog that I'm preparing, and I'm going to have it ready for when I come back to Seattle. And so I'm just going to configure it real quick.
And these are the typical Windows WordPress configuration steps. So we've, Windows Azure Websites was ready with WordPress deployed with default configuration in under 60 seconds, without ever opening a tool, without ever opening right through the browser itself.
So at this point, we have a WordPress blog, but it's pretty vanilla. There's nothing there yet. So what I really want to do is I want to take it with me on my laptop and customize it as I'm flying out. So I'm actually going to use the Web Matrix tool, and I'm going to go ahead and essentially suck this blog down into my machine. So what's happening here is, again, the magic of web deploy, where behind the scenes we downloaded that published setting files that I've shown you earlier. Web Matrix is smart enough to understand which files to download, and we can see the remote site. And now it's copying the files down and trying to set it up the same way. In a moment, it's actually going to figure out that this is WordPress, because we have enough signals based on our relationship with the WordPress community, and it's going to do some special stuff for WordPress. So it's actually, if I didn't have MySQL installed on the client, it would install MySQL and pull all the dependencies that are needed. So now it's making sure that WordPress will run very well natively on this machine using IIS Express. So the thing that's so powerful here is the fact that I'm going to have a full running copy of this website running on my machine, and because Web Matrix is an open environment, we allow communities to actually customize the environment to match their application. So since we know it's WordPress, we have some WordPress-specific content showing up to help the folks that are customizing their site, and we actually know which files are safe for people to edit. So all these files that are marked as gray, we know from the community that it's not so good if you mess with them, so we kind of encourage people not to touch them, but you can touch the config file. Another cool thing that we've done is Web Matrix is extensible enough for communities to create their own IntelliSense. So in this case, we actually have IntelliSense that is specific to WordPress, as well as IntelliSense that is specific to PHP. And that's actually available to other things. So Web Matrix 2 supports Node.js, and it's probably the first editor that has Node.js IntelliSense at this point, because it's a new framework. So at this point, I decided I want to do some customization, but it's really customization in the WordPress environment itself. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and if you notice, it's running locally on my local host. And I'm going to log in as the administrator. And the credentials I set up in the cloud running on the other MySQL database got transferred down to the MySQL databases running on this machine. So I'm going to go ahead and log in real quick. And I'm going to change the theme. Let's say we want to find a cloud theme. And we'll install this one. It looks cool. Very Azure-like. And we're going to go ahead and activate it. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new post. And I think that I'm very excited since my demo is working today. I just jinxed my other 5 demos that I'm going to do. And we'll go ahead and publish this. So now we have some customized blog. If we look at this, the site as it looks now, it has a little bit of a new interface and my new posting. And now all I have to do in order to push it to the cloud is hit the publish button. So again, we're running the same web deploy protocol that we've seen in Visual Studio. The interesting thing that we're seeing now is that it's calculating the diff between the local files and the server's files. And what we're seeing is all the stuff that got added in this new theme that we pushed. However, we did make changes to the database, right? We added a new blog post that actually sits inside the database. So since database synchronization is tough, we have the ability to kind of stomp over the existing database. So I'm going to pick that option because we want to retain our blog post. So I'll hit continue. And now WordPress is, not WordPress, Web Matrix is going to push the new WordPress files up to the cloud. So again, not too much coding. I've done a bunch of stuff. I was able to do it offline and go back to my site. Again, very powerful functionality because basically working against IIS or IIS Express on my client is the same as working against IIS on the server. And I'm still excited because now we're actually live on the internet and we're able to make this change. So I don't know about you guys. I think it's great. So anyway. But I've only been working on this for 2 years now. So, so I think that concludes this demo. We have, are we moving on to the manageability stuff?
I think it's just a quick, if you can quickly switch to the slides. Both a combination of the existing tools and enhancements to Web Matrix allow you to not write a single line of code and still use the power of the community, which has been building applications for the IIS and Microsoft stack. And you can bring the whole power as is to Windows Azure as well as you get the ability to do work offline, do offline editing, and do synchronization not just of the websites, but also of a SQL database, or in this case, a MySQL database with Azure as well. So that, I think, we're excited to announce both the availability of Windows Azure websites, but also at the same time, Web Matrix RC. So if you haven't tried that out yet, take it for a spin. It really gives you a lot of control and power over PHP, ASP.NET, and Node.js, or any of those frameworks which Windows Azure Website supports are also supported natively by Web Matrix with IntelliSense support. So you can actually, if you really love to code, you can code it. If you don't write code and you just want to create apps from templates or galleries, you can do that as well.
And there's some deep dive sessions on Web Matrix and Node.js during the week.
So we've talked a lot about different frameworks and different ways to go build applications and how you can push them up in Azure. One of the other things that you typically you've spent all these years learning is IIS 7 gave you the power of deep dive troubleshooting, monitoring, diagnostics. And when the typical question we get is, when I move this to a multi-tenant environment running in Azure, where I don't see the server, do I still get the capabilities and power of being able to manage and monitor and diagnose my website the way I do it on premises? And that's the beauty of Windows Azure websites, where though we're running the infrastructure and the machines and the web stack for you, you still have full visibility and control over all the monitoring and diagnostic information which applies to your website. So you don't have to worry about anything at the server level, because if a server goes bad, you can always shoot it and bring up another one. You would not notice. But anything that applies to your application and your code, whether it's 404 errors, if you need to debug, or if it's just performance, you have every tool, every method you've learned applies as is to Windows Azure websites as well. So let's see one last demo real quick with, if you can switch to demos, of the ability to do monitoring and diagnostics with Windows Azure websites the way you do it today, and all the power of IIS 7 troubleshooting available for you.
So if you remember the survey websites that we created earlier, basically I can go ahead and monitor it and see the hits that we've seen during this time. I can also see some custom information about the incoming bandwidth and so on. I had actually one of the users actually called me and he said, we're having a problem when we hit the help link on this guy. We're getting a 403 error. So I don't know what's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Configure tab, and I'm going to set up my logging or diagnostics. So we have 3 levels of diagnostics we can turn on. We can turn on essentially the vanilla IIS log that takes the incoming traffic. We have the detailed errors and the failed request tracing, and I'll show these. These are all vanilla IIS components. So we essentially just enable IIS monitoring tools. So I'll go back and hit this site a couple of times to create these error logs. And then I'm going to access these files. So for our preview version, we allow access to the log files using FTP that I've shown you earlier. Later on, we're considering other ways like HTTP and so on. So I'll go back to my trusty friend FileZilla. I had to practice in front of the mirror saying FileZilla like half the night. And we'll connect, and we're going to go to see those files. Obviously now it's taking its time connecting. So I'll go ahead to the log files, and I'm seeing three new folders I didn't have before. The HTTP are the kind of, again, the vanilla IIS logs. And I have the failed request, what we call the FREB files. In this case, I'll just download the XML and XSL so we can see it in a nicer way. And I'm downloading these files. And we can go ahead and open this one. And basically, this is a pretty robust, essentially tracing of what happened. So I can go and look at the actual error. This information doesn't give me much, so I'm not really excited. This is not helping me fix my problem. But I definitely, if I really want to fall asleep, I can go through all these kind of events and understand exactly how the stack looked at the time of the issue. So I'm going to try my luck with the detailed error file. So we'll go ahead and try and view this file. And this file is a bit more helpful. It says I had a forbidden. I guess the ECLs on this folder are set up correctly. And it says the default document is not configured. So a default document is actually something that the power of Windows Azure website allows me to do. I'm going to go back to FTP and go figure out if there's actually a document in that folder. So I can go back to my site, www.root, go to the help folder. And yeah, there's a help.html file there. So all I have to do is set it up. I'll copy the name because, we've already established that I can type. And we'll go back to the website here and back to the configure tab. So what we've seen until now, we've seen the ability to turn on logging. I can also do some stuff with app setting that we'll actually demo tomorrow in the 300 level session about Windows Azure website. But what I'm going to do here is just add it as a default document. So some of the functionalities, again, that are available on-prem or on IIS in the IIS manager are available through Windows Azure websites. And I'm going to hit save. Again, the same paradigm all over the portal is that you get to hit save when you change the settings, so you know what you're doing. And at this point, all I have to do, if I go back to the help link, it's going to render correctly. It took a little bit longer because all this metadata was traveling from our central configuration database back to the web server. And again, if you want to understand how it works under the hood, you should really come to my session tomorrow at noon. Not plugging the session.
Yeah, that was a plug for your session tomorrow.
That, yeah.
But, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you just saw was the way you do troubleshooting or diagnostics and even basic monitoring. All of that is still exposed, so you have the full power of anything that runs for your website. You have full access to the metadata, the logs, anything else that comes with it. So you don't have to relearn a new set of diagnostics tools, or if you've built a whole bunch of, let's say, scripts or third-party tools to monitor your website, they continue to work as is, and nothing's really changed because at the application and data level, it's semantically exactly the same as what runs on premises is now available for you to go use Windows Azure websites. And of course, the tool, the admin portal, exposes some of the most common paths and scenarios, so we make it even more easy. Of course, you can do all of this at the FileZilla level and edit it, but you have all the configuration. This is web.config exposed to you, so you can actually manage the entire website or a class of websites together natively through the portal without having to invest in any other tools or learning anything else. So one last thing we haven't showed yet is what if I become really popular, and I'm going to show some slides of it scaling. But let's just quickly see the same site if it becomes really popular. You're running and you started with 10 free websites, and it comes with its quotas and this limitations on how much you can run per website. But if it becomes very successful, Windows Azure Websites provides you a way to scale from a shared mode, a free mode, to even running it in a dedicated mode. And all that is a single slider click.
Yeah, so we support two modes of scaling. We support horizontal and vertical, or out and up. Even in the shared mode, you can still scale out. So I can increase the number of instances for my website. We picked 3 just for the purposes of the CTP. We can have more if we need to in the future. And basically, that creates 3 instances of your code that are running on 3 different web servers. That will increase the throughput for your application. The actual code and the content live in shared storage. So you can, if you manage state in a file, you have to understand that your code is running in 3 different places. So for some applications, that's fine. You have a stateless application. Maybe you use a database for your session state. Or if you use ASP.NET, you have a sticky session. But let's say that you're not comfortable or your application doesn't really work for multiple instances. In that case, you have the ability to go to reserved mode. And in reserved mode, basically, you can scale up. So in reserved mode, right now we support 3 types of machines. These are the same machines that are available for cloud service or for IaaS, for VMs. And as soon as you configure yourself to run in one of these modes, a whole web server is dedicated to you. This is a little bit different than a web role because you cannot have the access to manage the machine like you can with web role. The reason for that is that even this machine is virtualized by the Windows Azure website harness, if you will. When a machine like that fails, Windows Azure website is in charge of moving your code somewhere else. And in our high availability testing, we're able to fail between machines in a matter of seconds. So you get a little bit more protection and isolation, and you pay by a little less ability to manage the machines. So we support this ability to scale out and scale up. We can even go ahead and get more virtual dedicated or reserved instance machines. So if you have a really large app, a lot of hits, we're talking about millions of requests per second, you can go up and manage that. And again, in the future, when we go GA, when this will come out of the preview mode, will allow probably a larger sets of machines and larger amounts of instances.
So, yeah, so, if we can switch back to the slides, we can go real quick and see what's happening under the covers for when you hit that scale tab. So one of the first modes, and this is the default mode which you start with, is the shared mode. And Windows Azure Websites is basically, think of this as, we are running hundreds of machines, and they're all ready and waiting for you to just submit your code and your application. As soon as that happens, it gets deployed on one of those machines, and in this case, the green smiley is my application. And you get one instance of this application running on any of those virtualized machines, and hence it's instantaneous. You don't have to wait for a machine to get spun up with your code getting deployed. It's already up and running and just waiting. When you scale out in the shared mode, all you're doing is you're adding more instances. Think of these as just adding more processes running your app. Of course, your app needs to be multi-instance capable so that you're not screwing up the state of the application itself. But essentially, you get double the throughput because you have 2 instances now serving requests as opposed to the 1 default. For preview, you can go up to 3 instances. But if you need more capacity, and more importantly, if you need isolation, you can move from shared mode to the reserved mode. And what reserved mode essentially does is, we have from a pool of our existing machines, we carve out a machine which is dedicated for your application, or your web app. In which case, no other customers, no other users' websites is on the same box. And if you have multiple such sites, all your sites will be running on the same box, or if you scale up, on 2 of those boxes. So you can add more capacity even to reserved instances. We cap it to 3, as Neil mentioned, only for preview. So we just, this is the first version of starting it out. And you'll be able to scale it up to hundreds of machines the way you scale up web roles today. And if you add more and more applications to your reserved mode, all your websites and only your websites are running on the same set of boxes. So think of this as pre-provisioned, pre-managed, hot running machines available for you when you need them, and you can scale back and scale out as needed. And only if the time that you actually use those instances or the reserved mode is the time you pay, which goes back to the earlier promise of Windows Azure that Scott talked about. It's the whole benefit of cloud is capacity and scale on demand, and you pay for only the parts you use. So even in this case, the time I'm using this reserved instances, 2 of those, are the time you're paying for the 2 reserved instances. You can scale up, scale down, and it's capacity available for you on demand. So, of course, the obvious question, we might want to switch to a full slide mode. I really don't like to see myself on the screen. Thank you. So in terms of what it means to actually get this, of course, this is still a preview release of Windows Azure Websites. So the pricing is announced for certain components. We'll evolve them as needed, but you start for free. So your 10 websites that you get are free, and they're free for 12 months, hopefully longer. And for each of those shared websites, you can go up to 3 instances. In the reserved mode, you're getting a full machine, though it's still managed, and hence it supports all those same web deploy protocols, FTP protocol, and it's a managed service, and you pay at the standard Windows Azure compute charges. So during the preview period, it's getting offered at 33% discount on top of the Azure compute charges. So I believe what's normally 12 cents a minute, 12 cents an hour.
I think it's 8 cents a minute.
It's 8 cents during the preview period. So when you switch to reserve mode, you switch back to the regular Windows Azure concept of compute. But in that case, you can go and stack up to 100 websites on a single box. So if you really have a lot of small websites, or you care about isolation, or you care about capacity, in all those cases, you can move from shared mode to reserved mode. And going forward, you'll be able to keep your shared mode in parallel with reserved mode as well for certain applications. So you can always use, for example, if you want to do dev test, you can always dev test for free. Or if you have simple blogs, I host my personal blog on a shared mode, and with the number of hits, it scales up pretty well. So I don't really need to move to reserved mode ever. But if I'm running Scott's blog, I probably will run it on reserved mode, for example. SQL and MySQL, they are part of the way you get them in Windows Azure. Is you can continue using them with websites as well. We do offer a free 120 MB MySQL database with ClearDB. You can buy more from ClearDB's website for Windows Azure itself. That's a great managed service running within Windows Azure itself. So you're not going across data centers. It's a running service. It just happens to be managed by a partner. And that one MySQL for you to start and kick the tires is available for free. And you can keep getting more as your application needs grow as well. One very commonly asked feature is the ability to get custom domains and SSL. So those two things we didn't show today in the demo. Both are on the roadmap. Custom domains are available today in the reserved mode only. So when you move from shared mode to the reserved mode, you get the ability to use custom domains as well for your websites. Otherwise, in the shared mode, you get helloasp.azurewebsites.net for you to go use. SSL is on the roadmap. That'll be added pretty quickly.
Right now, we have a wildcard cert on AzureWebsites.net. So for simple situations, that's there.
That works. So real quick, so what you saw was today, with Windows Azure Websites, the new service, we essentially support pretty much most of the most commonly used web frameworks, be it classic ASP or ASP.NET, modern applications, or even open source frameworks. And that's the promise of Windows Azure. The way you saw Linux VMs in Windows Azure IaaS service. Can we switch to only slides? OK. Thank you. You can also run open source frameworks for the web stack in Windows Azure Websites. And both from a tooling perspective, as well as offline SDKs and tools, we have support for Node and PHP. So you can actually be sitting on a completely different box other than Windows and build and deploy and manage the app lifecycle state. And of course, more frameworks are coming soon, so this is not the end of it. But and we'd love to hear feedback on what other frameworks and app types you would like to run in Azure, so we can add it here. In terms of publishing methods, we saw demos of pretty much all of these, starting from the classic FTP. You can use Web Deploy, and Web Deploy opens up a lot of the ecosystem of tools which exist today, whether it's using Visual Studio 2010, 2012, Web Matrix. All of them use the Web Deploy protocol, and Web Deploy protocol is natively supported on Windows Azure Websites. And that is what enables everything from diffing the changes to incremental updates to pulling down the websites. And the protocol helps you with any of your other tools you might have built or used from third parties natively. With the Git integration, that's an example of both offering a build service, so you can actually build an ASP.NET application when you publish it, as well as a repository of old changes. So that the power of Windows Azure Websites, which allows you to quickly deploy, you can also use the same power to roll back, roll forward. So it's always the version you want on demand, deployed with a one click in a few seconds. And TFS provides for all the enterprise scenarios and our team scenarios where you can use both TFS hosted in Azure or your own hosted TFS server on premises, talking to Windows Azure Website Service, and gives you a way to do team collaboration as well as source control system to manage your web applications. So this was made possible with a lot of support of our partners, everything from ClearDB helping us run the MySQL service for those scenarios, to a bunch of our actual open source community partners which build applications. WordPress is the one example you saw, but the whole list that you see from everything from running Umbraco to Drupal to Joomla. All those applications which used to run on IIS on-premises are now also available in Windows Azure, and this list will keep growing as we certify more and more applications to run well in Windows Azure. In addition to the app partners, we also have a whole bunch of partners which provide value-added services on top of Windows Azure websites. So if you want to do a detailed outside-in monitoring, for example, so we have services from partners like New Relic and AppDynamics, so that you can, if anyone uses, for example, Gomez today to point and ping a website, you can use services similar from New Relic and AppDynamics as well, which offer services to do app decks and use my site out and running. So Windows Azure offers native monitoring and troubleshooting and diagnostics out of the box for free. You can get these value-added solutions to do richer monitoring, and they continue to work the way they work on premises as well. So in summary, the three promises we started with, hopefully we've had a chance to demonstrate you can start simple, start free, focus on the code and the application, and use any framework, any tool, any operating system, whether you're doing, we could have done most of those demos, except for Visual Studio, of course, through a Mac, on a Mac as well. And you're always working live, and you can go live or go big instantaneously. The power is in your hands. So just a quick summary of those big things. The fact that it's running as a fully managed service makes it available in seconds, so you don't have to wait for minutes or even days, what it typically takes on premises or with other stacks. You always have the website available. To do this demo, normally we would have to fake creation of websites. Now, websites actually take 3 seconds to create. You can actually do most of the demos live and on stage, and kind of makes for a pretty cool demo. You can start for free, and you can scale it, and you can have pretty much infinite capacity when you exit preview mode. And you never have to worry about any concepts of setting up my own router or ARR or load balancer, and that all is completely managed for you. So the parts that you don't have to care about, you don't have to worry. We take care of them for you. But you still don't lose control over app level or website level monitoring and diagnostics. In terms of the frameworks and applications, you can pick any of the web frameworks, as well as both SQL and NoSQL options. SQL being MySQL or SQL Azure. And NoSQL options, we've announced a bunch of partnerships with Tengen, CloudEnd. So you get the power of MongoDB and other NoSQL options as well in Windows Azure. So you start seeing the Windows Azure ecosystem offer both Microsoft and non-Microsoft stacks, so you can build richer applications and serve any segment that you need to go service with Windows Azure being the hosting platform for you. And of course, you can, if you already have applications built and managed using Visual Studio or Web Matrix, definitely try out the newer version so that you get the native Windows Azure integration. But even without those, you can still make the two talk to each other. Then updated SDK and tools just make it easier. It understands the default paths and parameters. But other than that, leverage the benefits of tools like Web Matrix to get intelligence, or just do a no-coding app development. And we'd love to do this demo. I think we probably will in a new session, and using CLI tools from non-Windows platforms as well. The last part, which is very important, is for you to be productive, you need to be able to rapidly iterate, as well as be able to collaborate and work together with other people in your team or in company. And both in terms of Git integration and TFS integration, that's the power of working on live site, but still collaborating and being able to see results really quickly. So you no longer have to wait to do a full publish and deploy and wait for it to happen. You can see and make the changes live, locally debug, push it up. And if needed, you can always pull it down. So you can work offline as well. And if you deploy it real quick, one of the downsides of doing rapid iteration is you can screw up. But if you do screw up, you have full ability to roll back as well. So you are in control of what goes out, when it goes out, and the ability to roll back as well. From a management platform and a philosophy perspective, we've invested a lot in Windows Azure Management all up, so you get out-of-box monitoring without you ever having to set up custom probes or custom agents. You don't have to worry about any of that. That's what Windows Azure does for you. It's a fully managed service. We offer out-of-box monitoring, out-of-box troubleshooting, and you get the benefits of it both through Portal as well as through command lines as well. So one session I would highly recommend attending tomorrow is Nir's deep dive into how it works and how you can go beyond the basic existing applications and leverage the power everything from multiple scale reserved instances to geo availability and geo data centers available, so you don't have to worry about getting infrastructure only in one place. All that and how it works is in the Azure Under the Hood websites session tomorrow, as well as if you want to learn more about the continuous integration. We couldn't get into TFS demo, but the demos on TFS and Web Matrix and how you work with Windows Azure websites using those environments as well for continuous integration. And last but not least, if you care about monitoring and managing these assets, I actually did a session right before this, so it kind of doesn't apply. Sequencing changed. But there's another one on Friday morning, which gets into deep monitoring and diagnostics for Windows Azure services. So with that, we would love to, so we have a whole bunch of questions which got submitted on Twitter we'll take. But we would love to hear both feedback on the session, of course, as well as just feedback on Windows Azure websites of what you like, what you don't like, what you would like to see in the roadmap as well. So with that, we have about 5 minutes. Just want to say thank you very much for joining us for the afternoon session. Really appreciate that. And we'll be available for Q&A here. Thank you.
So we want to do the Q&A? Or?
Yeah, there are a bunch of questions which have already showed up, so we'll just take the questions. If you have more questions, keep sending on Twitter. The first question here is, what are the images, where are the images stored for WordPress on Windows Azure websites? So the content is actually stored along with the website itself. So Windows Azure websites gives you a storage. So you get 1 gig of free storage in case of shared, and 10 gigs of storage in case of reserved. And all the content is packaged into that storage account. So it gets counted against your storage quota. And that's where the images live. The next question, I'll let Neil answer this one, is how are the 5 hours of shared CPU time calculated? What is the duration? Is it a day, week, or month?
So the 5 hours are per month. However, we split them into durations of 5 minutes, I believe, and we monitor it every 5 minutes in order to make sure people don't abuse us or try to DOS attack the whole system.
So the quotas get reset every day. So if you go over your quota, which is, let's say, 5 gigs of network bandwidth per month, so what's 165 megs per day. So for that day, your site does get shut down in a shared mode, but next day it's up and on again. So under DOS attack, you will not run out of your quota. It gets reset every day as well.
Yeah, and after, if we have sites that abuse the quota in a consistent manner, after X amount of times, we'll actually shut them down completely. So we have some algorithms to make sure we don't get hacked as badly. Next question was, does the standard SLA apply for one instance? So in this preview version, we don't have an SLA. Once we go GA, when we have a general availability, we'll be able to do it. Our architecture does allow us to remove the restriction of having to have 2 instances, like the web role case.
Correct.
So we'll probably be able to do it with 1 instance, but again, we don't have a
So when the service does go live and is generally available, we will be able to offer with 1 reserved instance SLA as well, because it's not the same as a typical web role, because you don't manage the VMs. We manage the VMs, so we make sure they're load balanced, highly available, and you still get the SLA based on that. So real quick prompt from the back. We have some T-shirts available if you stick around, and I believe there's another session right after this one as well. So I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
But if you stick around, I believe somebody's going to come and hand out T-shirts. Awesome.
So
okay.
the question was, you want to take the last one? Or how big is the MySQL database, and can I get more space?
How big is the MySQL database?
So it's 20 megabytes for the free version. Yes, you can get a bigger one. There's a page in the ClearDB website. There's a page that details their Azure offering. I believe they have several SKUs that go pretty big. And if you want to go purchase one, they'll probably take the data and increase the size. Right. So the answer is yes. But
and you'll see, over the next few months, even more native integration of services like MySQL and third-party services in the portal, so you don't have to hopefully go to cleardb.com to buy or manage it. You should be able to do it right through Windows Azure portal. But we'll talk about that in a few more weeks and months as well. So, yeah. Great. So with that, we're out of time. And thank you again very much for staying back as well as the questions. And I think the next session on SQL or
is on
data
storage.
Storage. Great.
SQL and
thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.